Welcome. And we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
So we are on to the very last Parsha of Leviticus, of Vayikra, and the Parsha is Bechukotai. And it's a very famous Parsha because it contains blessings, and worse yet, it contains curses. And we are going to start off with the blessings. And essentially, it's saying that the premise is that it's not a question of whatever you like. In other words, you can either do the mitzvot, and this is, of course, addressed to the Jewish people, the people of Israel, that if you want to do the mitzvot, that's fine. And if you don't want to do the mitzvot, that's fine too. It's not that kind of situation. It is a covenant. In other words, this is really an agreement, a very serious agreement, that we actually perform these mitzvot, that God has given us these commandments, and that we perform these commandments. And if we don't perform these commandments, there are consequences. And the consequences, as laid out, are really, really severe, which is why Harlan, before we started recording, mentions that he doesn't like this particular parsha. And there's no surprise. There are no surprises. The curses are absolutely devastating. And on the other hand, we're grown-ups, and the Torah is treating us as grown-ups. And to know that there are consequences for neglect, the consequences for rejection, and there are consequences to the choices we make in our lives. And rather than allow us to go blindly through and reap those consequences, the Torah would rather have us open our eyes and be aware that if we do these kinds of things, these things are going to happen. What is so interesting, though, is how human nature has not changed at all. Yes, technology has changed, culture has changed, tastes have changed, but the truth is, right down and deep, human nature is what it always was. And that's one reason why studying the Torah and trying to get understanding and having a compassionate heart, both in terms of the Torah towards life and to humans and nature, is really, really very, very important. I was reading yesterday in Talmud Yerushalmi, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was a little piece that talked about how the most important thing you have is your heart, in the sense of what kind of heart do you have? Do you have a good heart towards things? Do you have a bad heart towards things? And somehow it's saying, and I really believe this, that deep, deep, deep down, we are all motivated by emotions, and whether we choose to be rational or irrational, whatever, it has to do with that particular very deep little place inside of ourselves that is essentially emotional. And that's why we can have people saying things that in seriousness that are absolutely crazy. At least to our minds might sound crazy, but to them it doesn't sound crazy, because that's where their heart is. So, onwards. So here's this little word. It's small in English and it's small in Hebrew, just 2 letters, and the word is if. If. Right? So if you walk, if you go in my statutes, ve'et mitzvotai, and my commandments, tishmeru, you guard, if you guard my commandments, or you observe, practice my commandments.
Rabbi, I don't see the Hebrew. I don't see it on my computer.
I don't know. I thought I was sharing. Let me double check. Let's try this again. Thank you. How's it now?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Harlan. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Oh, well. Okay. All right, we'll start again, right? Im bechukotai telechu. If you walk in my statutes, Ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru, and you guard my mitzvot, my commandments. Asitem otam, and you practice them. And you practice them. So some lovely Rashi here. Im bechukotai telechu, if you walk in my statutes. Yachol ze kiyom hamitzvot. He says, this could mean that is the establishment, in other words, the practice of the commandments, right? This first little phrase. But since it goes on and says, and guard my commandments, etc., he says, there's already mentioned the practice of the commandments. So what am I accomplishing? What is this supposed to say? What does it mean if you walk in my statutes? How do we understand that? Is it just repeating, being repetitive, so redundant? So he says, "Shetihiyu amelim b'Torah," that you should labor in the Torah, that you should take pains to study Torah. You should weary yourselves in the study of Torah. You got to learn the stuff if you're going to practice the stuff. And so it starts off basically by saying, we know, right? Talmud Torah keneged kulam. The study of Torah is like all of it. And please forgive me for being editorializing, but the question is, do we in fact do this? Is this in fact something we take seriously? And in fact, already, believe me, it's not a modern phenomenon. It already is mentioned in Tractate Brachot about essentially the neglect of Torah, already back then. So again, has human nature changed? Ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru, and you guard my mitzvot, right? Heve amelim b'Torah, it says, but labor in the Torah, al manat lishmor. It's not just an academic study, it is for the sake of guarding, observing, ulekayem, and to uphold it. In other words, you learn the rules so that you can practice the rules, so that you can do the rules. So this is something that has always struck me about Torah study, because there are many subjects that are really fascinating and yet are not necessarily practical. In other words, they are academically fascinating, but the study of Torah, which, by the way, on some levels can be compared, especially when you get into the study of the law, but even other elements, but especially the so-called, you might say, legal aspects of the Torah, is you can compare it to mathematics in some ways. It gets complicated. The logic involved, the argumentation involved can be, as you've already, I think, experienced a little bit, especially when we've taken a look at the Torah Tamima. It really is very sophisticated thinking, but it's not, it's for the sake of application. And mathematics can be studied pure mathematics, purely for the beauty of what mathematics reveals. But of course, there's also applied mathematics, which has, of course, taken us very, very far. And of course, probably taken us to this technological age. So what's the difference? The difference is that I think that the study of Torah also talks about human relationships, and mathematics doesn't. I'm not saying that you can't apply mathematics to human behavior, obviously statistics, etc., but in terms of the deeper elements of spirituality, etc., I think you can make a distinction. So, at any rate, you study Torah with the idea of applying it in your life, finding ways in which to deeply enhance the nature of your life. So there's a statement in the Torah itself that actually supports this idea. In Dvarim Hey, that's Deuteronomy chapter 5, V'limadatim otam, you shall learn them, or lamadatim otam, you shall learn them, ushmartem la'asotam, and you shall observe them, you shall guard them, to practice them, to actually put them into practice. So that's the one side of the condition. And here is the consequence. V'natati gishmechem be'itam. I will give your rains in their time. V'natna ha'aretz yevula, and the earth will bring forth its produce, will give its produce. V'etz hasadeh iten piryo, and the tree of the field will give its fruit, will bear fruit. So, be'itam, in their time, the rains in their time. And this is again the Sifra, right? And also in the tractate Ta'anit, page 22. B'sha'a she'ein, in other words, what do we mean by at their time? At the time, at a she'ein derech b'nei adam latzeit. I'll give them at a time when people don't usually go out. For example, kagon b'leilei revi'it, on Wednesday nights. Yom Revi'i is Wednesday, and this is an earlier text of Rashi, b'leilei Shabbatot, and Friday nights. So that's not when you're supposed to be going out to work or shop or whatever. That's when the rain is going to fall. So when the rain falls at those particular times, we might understand that as a sign of divine blessing. So let me take a look at this. So I struggled as I prepared this. Why Wednesday night? What's the signal? I understand Friday night, but why Wednesday night? And I looked at the Torah Tamima and I found the answer. So here we go. Here's the Torah Tamima. Gishmechem be'itam, your rains at their time. Mahu be'itam, what do we mean by at their time? Lo shikura, that means not, literally it means not drunk. V'lo tzme'ah, and not parched. Ela beinonit, but intermediary. What do we mean by this? So there's a nice Torah Tamima. You can see there's a footnote there. So he says, Ritzono lomar, what it means to say is, Shelo tishteh haaretz gishamim yoter midai. That is to say that the earth won't absorb, literally means drink, but will absorb the rains too much. Mipnei sheribui gishamim. That is because too much rain, mitashtashim et haaretz, they make the earth muddy. Ve'eina osa perot, so it isn't able to yield fruit. Ela tishteh b'midah hadrusha, but that it should absorb the correct rain, as much rain as it needs. Ve'lo nitpa'er. So he goes on to say, this is what's so lovely about Torah Tamima. He goes on to say, he's just explained what this Hebrew means, right? He's clarified it, but he goes on to say, it's not so clearly, he says, it's not so clear to me. Hey, ach mefaresh, how does the Gemara come to explain lashon be'itam, using the language of in its time, al midah, regarding quantity? All right, we're talking about in its proper time, but it's explaining it as the quantity of rain. And perhaps we can explain this, be'itam, that using this term be'itam milashon in the same sense as la'ut et ya'ef davar. So you can see itam, and here's the root la'ut. Okay, so what it means is to speak timely words, right? Timely words to the et davar, that's words, to the weary, to the ya'ef, to the weary. To speak, Isaiah is talking about this words of consolation that are going to come from God. V'hainu, and he explains this, lekavein et haderech, that is to focus the way, hadarush v'nachon, the proper way. In other words, the proper kinds of ways. So be'itam means, in this sense, proper rainfall. But taham hadavar shenir elo, and as far as the reason that the Talmud explains this, Lortzi muvan hamila mipshateha, to explain it in this way that's not the obvious, not the straightforward way. Iyein mashikatuv, look and see, ba'ot hasamuch, in the next little note. So remember, we're looking at why he talks about Wednesday nights, right? Not to fall on Wednesday nights. Where did Rashi get that? So here we go. Davar acher, another interpretation of be'itam. Belele revi. Now we are talking about time, right? He's saying here explicitly in Tractate Ta'anit, page 22b, it says on the nights of Wednesday nights, uvelele Shabbatot, and on Friday nights. It says explicitly Wednesday nights. Here we go. So you look at my names and notes and you'll see, of course, right? Piresh Rashi belele revi'iyot uvele Shabbatot. Rashi explains this as Wednesday nights and Friday nights. She'enan toreach al b'nei adam, because it's not, in that case, the rains do not cause hardship on people. The ein hulchin badrachim, because they don't go along the paths. Mipnei igeret bat machalat. So, or igrat bat machalat, because of igrat bat machalat. And I struggled to begin to understand what this means, and then I understood, because I didn't know if this was like a page number of something, but it's Shem, shade, and the word shade means a demon. It's the name, Igrat Bat Machalat is the name of a demon. Keda Amrinan Bepsachim Kuf Yud, as is mentioned in the Tractate Pesachim, page 112b, Hadkan Lashono. This is the end of Rashi's explanation. So our Rashi doesn't include all this other part where it says he explains why Wednesday night. But here we have, so it could be that there is a manuscript that does include this additional information. So apparently there was, by the way, I can say that there is concern in the Talmud. They did believe in these demons and spirits. They had a strong belief then of these particular things. And they would talk about people going out at night by themselves, that it was considered particularly dangerous. And apparently there was some belief in a demon on Wednesday. And on Wednesday nights, this demon was prevalent. So again, obviously, we would consider this superstition. I'm just here to try and explain what, in this particular case, I would have to work hard to try and give a rational explanation for what's going on here. But we still need to look into this a little bit. The Hatam bePesachim, because in Pesachim, in the Tractate Pesachim, Mevu'ar, it's clarified, Rak shelo yetzeh yechidi, that the condition of not going out Wednesday nights is that one should not go out on Wednesday nights by yourself, yechidi, by yourself. Aval b'chabura, but if you go with companions, late lanba, we don't have any concern. It means, I believe here, and it says, so this would give us a reason to argue against this Wednesday night statement. But regarding nights, Friday nights, lo natan tam, there was no explanation given, or Rashi didn't give an explanation. But tzarich lomar, and one has to say, the samach al tam hapashut, that he simply was relying on the obvious reason. Mipnei bnei adam shoftim, because people are at home resting, they're v'nochim, and they're not laboring, they're ceasing from their labors, and they're resting, b'vatehem, in their homes, b'layla hahu, on this particular night. Umashinar nir'elo lahadoresh. So here we go. And what the person who gave this explanation, what they saw fit,lohotzi hamilah be'itam, to take this word be'itam in the text, right? Mipshata, from its obvious meaning. It appears mishum de'ein lefaresh be'itam, because it doesn't make sense. One might not want to explain be'itam b'sha'a sha'aretz tricha lekashamim. We don't want to go with the basic or the obvious meaning, which would mean the time when the land requires rain. Zezeh kalul, because it's already included b'masha katuv, with what was written, or what is written, v'natna ha'aretz yevula, that the land will give its produce. Obviously, if it's not getting enough rain, it's not going to give its produce. So we don't need to explain rains in their time in the obvious meaning. Demimele. Hold on one second. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Demimele mavuar. Okay, because it's clear, right? The hagashamim yaduba et hadarush, that the rains fell at their proper time, at the time they were needed. The imkain, and for this reason, tzarich lomar, one has to, lama li lohosif. Why would it be necessary? Lohosif od, to add in addition, right? Minatinat hageshem bitam, the statement of giving rain in its proper time. V'lachen darish, and for this reason, he explains the word de'itam, the kavana acheret, for another purpose, k'mevoar, as we've just explained. So, right. All right, back to the text. We'll take a look at them. Okay. Right, we're into actually this page here. V'hisig lachem daish et batzir, and your threshing will reach for you your vintage, at the vintage. In other words, okay, so Rashi will explain. It's speaking poetically, right? I mean, quite literally as well, but clear message about the volume of harvest. Uvatzir yasig et hazara, and your vintage will reach the sowing the field. Va'achaltem lachmechem lasova, you shall eat your bread, literally, but it means your food. You shall eat your food to satisfaction. You'll be satisfied. Vishavtem lavetach, and you will dwell securely ba'artzachem, in your land. V'hesig lachem daish et batzir, your threshing will reach the vintage. She'ehe hadayish meruba, that is to say that it's going to take you such a long time because you've got so much to thresh. Va'atem asukimbo, that you're occupied with it. Ad habatzir, all until the vintage. Uva batzir, and during the vintage, ta'asku ad sha'at hazara. You're going to have so many grapes, so much vintage, that you're going to be processing it until the time of the planting. Va'achaltem lachmachem lasova, and you shall eat your food to satisfaction. So in the Sifra, ochel k'mi'ah, you can eat just a little, v'hu mitbarech b'me'av, and it is blessed in your innards. In other words, there's one question of volume, there's another question of satisfaction. So to be able to be satisfied, to feel a sense of satisfaction, having eaten just a little, wow, is that a blessing? Believe me, I would appreciate that blessing very much. So we're going to stop here, and we'll pick it up, God willing, tomorrow. And let's put that here. Let's see. Oops. Let's go right here. And I'm going to stop the share. And if any of you have any comments on what we've read.
Yeah.
All right, Golda.
Why did they use Deuteronomy instead of this in the Shema? Because it's this, yeah, it's very similar. I mean,
very
yeah.
similar, very similar. Good question. And I don't know that I can necessarily, the simple answer I can give you is because if they used this, what would you be saying to me? What would Golda be saying to me?
Why didn't they use Deuteronomy? No, this comes first though. But this comes first.
I know.
Yeah.
But remember, Deuteronomy is in a sense Moses' last will and testament to the Jewish people.
Okay.
The other piece too, I think, is that it talks about, with all your heart and with all your soul in that particular passage. It actually
in the previous passage.
In the Deuteronomy passage.
Right. No, it's the next
yes.
Oh, later on in the
Well, in the second paragraph,
yes.
As far as the first paragraph of the Shema is concerned, right? If that's what you're asking me, then the reason is, of course, it starts with Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem.
No. It's the second paragraph.
Right, that's what I thought.
The Natati and all that stuff. It's all in there.
That's what I thought. Yes, and I thought you were talking about the second paragraph.
Yes.
But I think it. Okay, I'll tell you another reason, because in that paragraph it talks about the tefillin. It talks about putting them as a sign.
Okay, so it just leads into that. Okay.
Yes, that's all part of that paragraph. That's not mentioned here.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's a good reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I suspect that that's the reason. I'm going to stop the recording here.
I got. Oh, okay.